President Xi meeting with Putin this week?
Well, he told me he was going to. I think it's good. I get along with both of them, but I think it's good. I don't know if the ceremony was quite as brilliant as mine. I watched. I think we topped them. Good team. But no, I get along with Putin. I get along with Xi.
Well, there's President Trump at Joint Base Andrews last night on the latest meeting between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin in Beijing. Putin went to China right after President Trump left, and Putin and Xi Jinping condemned U.S. foreign policy as, quote, unquote, irresponsible. Both agreed to advance bilateral cooperations. Meetings ended without a final deal to build a natural gas pipeline between Russia and China. Joining me now is the Gatestone Institute senior fellow, Gordon Chang. Gordon, of course, Xi Jinping invites Putin right after Trump leaves. One more pinch there. Your reaction?
Well, the narrative, of course, is that the world is coming to China. But when you look at both China and Russia right now, you're talking about two weak states. And what are they doing? They're complaining about the United States. And they're complaining about us because they can't do anything about what President Trump is doing. So, for instance, you have President Trump removing China from the Western Hemisphere, removing them from the Middle East, and the Chinese can't do very much about it except to carp from the sidelines. And then, of course, Russia is having problems in Ukraine, losing territory, and so this is a very bad story for China and Russia. And the most important thing about the Putin-Xi Jinping meeting, Putin didn't get approval for the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline, which you mentioned. And that was the most important item on his agenda, by far more important than anything else. And so he's going away from Beijing with, yes, 40 agreements, but those are meaningless. He didn't come away with what he really needed, which was approval for the pipeline.
Yeah, it's a great point all around, Gordon, because these two guys, Putin and Xi, they were expecting this new world order, okay? And then Trump enters the White House, and the world order is no longer what they thought. It is once again America in the #1 position. China's been trying to undermine and overtake the U.S. as the #1 superpower for a long time now, not so fast with President Trump in the Oval Office. Gordon, I sat down with Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang, and he told me the details of what went on in China. He said that while he did get approval from President Trump and the White House to sell those H200 chips, he said now it's up to the Chinese government to accept Nvidia's H200 chips into their market. Watch this. You were just on a trip with President Trump to China. The word was that you did get an approval to send H200 chips to China. Is that true? Will you be selling those chips? And what can you tell us about your business into China?
The interactions with the Chinese leaders were really positive. It was really fun to watch. President Trump and the United States has approved and has licensed the H200 for us to ship to certain customers in China. At this point, the Chinese government has to decide whether to allow H200s to enter China for their customers, for their market. They're balancing, of course, on the one hand, protecting the local companies like Huawei and others. On the one hand, on the other hand, conveying to the world that they want China to be an open market, and in fact to be even wider open in the future than today. And so I think that somewhere in the middle is where they're going to work it out. Whatever they decide to do, we will honor. And if we have the opportunity to go back to China, we'd be more than pleased and joyed. And it would be a great honor for us to support that market.
Gordon, what do you think here? Are you expecting Beijing to accept these chips?
No, I don't. And what's important is that the Trump administration licensed the export of the H200 not this month, but in January. And since January, China has not approved the purchases. So really what we're talking about is a long-term attitude on the part of the Chinese government not to buy Nvidia. Now, Nvidia is doing very well without China, as we saw from the earnings report. They don't need China. And I think we shouldn't be selling H200s or anything else to China because we know that they are not going to get addicted to our technology stack, as Commerce Secretary Lutnick said. So why are we helping China bridge the gap? We know that their Huawei chips aren't very good. DeepSeek, the Chinese AI company, told us that in the middle of last year, that they couldn't release their R2 model because they didn't have Nvidia chips. So this is a competition, and we shouldn't be helping the competitor.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, there's this debate within Silicon Valley as well. I mean, Jensen Huang wants to sell his chips. He wants more business. No surprise. But there are many people pushing back on that because of national security threats, like Anthropic, who says we shouldn't, who has the position that you have. We shouldn't be selling any chips to China right now if we want to be #1 in AI. But, Gordon, yesterday, President Trump agreed to speak with Taiwan's president. The administration, of course, right now is weighing whether or not to continue this $14 billion weapons sale to Taiwan. Obviously, that came up with Xi Jinping. Watch this.
Do you have any plans to call President Lai of Taiwan before you make a decision on the weapons package?
Well, I'll speak to him. I speak to everybody. We have that situation very well in hand. We had a great meeting with President Xi. It was amazing, actually. It was amazing. Many of you were there. We'll work on that, the Taiwan problem.
So what about that, Gordon? I mean, it would be a big message to the world if he doesn't go through with this weapons sale to Taiwan, wouldn't it?
Well, certainly what it would say to the world is that China is more powerful than the United States, that President Trump submits to Xi Jinping. Also, it's not just the Taiwan issue. It also is Japan. We would be sending terrible messages to our friends and partners because I think that would dishearten them. China right now bluffs a lot about Taiwan. It can't invade the main island because Xi Jinping has decimated his military. So now's the perfect time to sell arms to Taiwan because that will bolster deterrence. And that means ensuring peace and stability for years to come. So there's a clear answer here. President Trump needs to make that approval fast. And if it doesn't, people are going to start wondering about the U.S. and not just in East Asia, but also in Europe as well. So this is a critical test of American leadership.
All right. We will be watching all of that. Of course, this is high stakes meetings and high stakes deals. Gordon, good to see you. Thank you.